That is terrific. Hey, can I ask you as we start to do me a favor? Could you guys all together scream as loud as you can? Terrific, terrific. Now, think about something. What if you took that energy and you turned it toward the works of Jesus Christ? You know what would happen? You would revolutionize this whole country. We underestimate what we can do as Christians to change the world. What did Jesus say? He said, I've come to light a fire on the earth. That's the church's job. It's not just to have a little private faith. It's a faith that sets the whole world on fire. And you could do it with the energy in this room. Hey, listen, I want to talk to you about being a saint. The most important thing, and it's the ordinary expectation of the church, is that everybody in this room becomes a saint. There was a great French spiritual writer, and he said, there's only one real sadness in life, and that's not to be a saint. Think about that for a second. Think about the goals you have in life. You know, to make a certain amount of money, to marry the right person, to have a particular kind of job. Well, that's great, and let's say you don't realize those dreams. So what, really? Because the only real sadness in life is not to be a saint. Not to be the person that God is calling you to be. Everything else by comparison is trivial. Are you becoming a saint or not? And so, what does it look like, everybody, to be a saint? What does that look like? I'm going to say it looks like three things. To be a saint is, first of all, to find the center. Secondly, to be a saint is to know that you're a sinner. And thirdly, to be a saint is to realize that your life is not about you. Okay, those three things. To find the center, to know you're a sinner, and to realize your life is not about you. If you do those three things, you'll become the person God wants you to be. So, think about the first one now. To find the center. There was a great philosopher who said, to be a saint is to be about one thing. To be a saint is to be about one thing. Now, it doesn't mean that your life becomes boring or monotonous. That's not what it means. What it means is there's one central value by which you're running your life. There's one center around which everything else revolves. You know when you go into those old churches, I'm sure you got some here, and you find those rose windows. You know what I mean? Those great wheels of light and color. At the center of the rose window is always a depiction of Christ. And then wheeling around that center in these ordered, beautiful harmonies are all the other parts of the window. Now think for a second. That's a symbol of your soul. If Christ is the center of your life, now think of all the elements of the window as all the other parts of your life. Of your mind, of your passions, of your sexuality, of your friendships, of your job, of your family. Think of everything else that makes you up. If Christ is in the middle of the whole operation, then your life will fall into a beautiful harmony around that center. Here's a good question to ask all of us. Does every aspect of my life belong to Jesus? Does my mind belong to Him? Does my will belong to Him? Do my friendships belong to Him? Does my entertainment belong to Him? If not, something's the matter. If not, then he's not the center of my life. Now listen, everybody. Everybody here has a center. It might be your own ego. It might be pleasure. It might be power. It might be your career. It might be the things you're dreaming of, the money you might make. If that's the center of your life, everything else will fall around that center. And if it's something other than Christ, trust me when I tell you, it's going to make you unhappy. Remember the story? It's in the Gospel of Mark. When this man possessed by a demon comes into the synagogue. He's one person, but he says to Jesus, "What do you want of us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us?" He speaks in the plural, even though he's one person. What's going on? The word behind our word devil is diabolos in the Bible. You know what that means? That means the scatterer. Diabalein in Greek means to scatter, to divide, to separate. If Christ is not the center of your life, then you become split, divided. Your mind goes this way, but your body goes that way. One passion goes this way, the other one goes that way. You're divided, split, at war with yourself. To be a saint, everybody, is to say, everything in me belongs to Jesus Christ. Every part of me revolves around that center. So, sometime today, or maybe tonight, do a little examination of conscience. Ask yourself that question. Everything in me is in service of Christ. If it is, then you found the center. Listen, everybody, what do we do? What do we Catholics do every week? But we come to Mass. How come? We come to adore the Lord. And that word is really interesting, adore. Ad ora in Latin means mouth to mouth. It means to the mouth of. You see, when you're worshiping God, what you're doing is you're aligning your whole life to God. You're mouth to mouth with Him. Can you say that about the whole of your life? If you can, then you've found the center, and your soul will become beautiful. Here's something else with this idea of the center in mind. On some of the great medieval churches, there's a thing called the Wheel of Fortune. It's a great circle. At the top, there's a king. And the king says, "I'm reigning." Now the circle turns this way, and there's a guy who's losing his crown. And he says, "I've reigned." Go to the bottom of the wheel, there's a poor man, a pauper. And he says, "I've got no power." Now the wheel turns up this way, and there's a guy saying, "I will reign." Now, it's a cool point. The Wheel of Fortune is life. Sometimes we're up, sometimes we're losing power, sometimes we got nothing, sometimes we're gaining. That's life. Most of you are probably thinking, "I want to get to the top of that wheel. I want to be as rich as I can, as famous as I can, as powerful as I can." The one thing I can guarantee you is, in the course of your life, that wheel's going to turn. Yeah, sometimes you're up. Is that good? Yeah, I'm sure. But listen, talk to people on the top of the wheel, in whatever field. Maybe it's sports, it's entertainment, it's finance, it's business, whatever. Talk to people on the top. What do they say? They're full of anxiety because they know they can lose their position. Sometimes in life, you're at the bottom. Is that a fun position to be in? Well, no, of course not. Sometimes you're losing losing power, losing influence. Is that fun? No. You're coming up the other side. You're trying to gain power, influence, money, whatever it is. Is that a place of comfort, contentment? No, that's also a place of anxiety. The point is, don't live your life on the rim of the wheel. You'll always be anxious. But now, in the center of that wheel is a depiction of Christ. Who is Christ? Who is He? He's our link to God. He's our link to the sacred. And Christ never changes. Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. Christ our link to the infinite, eternal power of God. The point of the Wheel of Fortune is live your life in the center, not on the rim of the wheel. And believe me, there are people far older than you. There are established people in this society who've lived their whole life on the rim of the wheel. Don't live it there, but find the center. Even now, find the center and stay there. Okay? That's path number one. Find the center. Here's number two. A saint is someone who knows that he or she is a sinner. To be a saint is to know that you are a sinner. What's sin? Well, I talked about adoration, right? We go to Mass to adore. Ad ora, mouth to mouth. When I adore, I'm linked to God. So what's sin? Sin is bad worship. Sin is worshiping the wrong thing. Oh, if you don't know it now, it'll sink in the course of your life. What St. Augustine said long ago. Lord, you've made us for yourself. Therefore, our heart is restless till it rests in thee. What does that mean? What does that mean? Everybody in this room has got a restless heart. You know what I'm saying? We're searching for happiness. We're searching for joy. And we try to find it in wealth. We try to find it in pleasure. We try to find it in power. We try to find it in money. We try to find it in honor. Does it ever work? It never works, young people, because it can't work. We're all wired for God. We're all finally hungry for God. So when we worship something other than God, we say, my life is all about money. It's all about my own ego. It's all about gaining power. It's all about being honored. My life tends to fall apart. That's where the diabolic comes in. I shatter. I scatter. Sin is bad worship. So, here's a simple question. What do you worship? Everybody worships something. Trust me. You know, it's cool that word worship, our word, is from an earlier English word, worthship. What's of highest value to you? Everyone's got it. There's something. What's of highest value to you? What's most important? That's what you worship. And see, once you find that, you'll know how your life is structured. If you worship anything other than God, your life will become scattered. And you will become sad. You know, what did Jesus say? He said, I've come that you might have joy and have it to the full. Did you think that right away, immediately when people mention religion? Do you think of joy right away? You should. I mean, that's what the Lord said. I've come that you might have joy. How do you get joy? By worshiping the right thing. By worshiping God. So sin is getting our lives off kilter by focusing on something other than God. The other story, I'm sure you've heard it in the Bible. One of my favorites in the Old Testament. It's in the first book of Kings. It's a story of Elijah the prophet and the priests of Baal. The story is really simple. The priests of Baal are those who worship false gods, right? And Elijah is the prophet of the true God. So they have a kind of combat. They go up to Mount Carmel, this high mountain. And Elijah says, okay, you priests of Baal, you set up altars to your gods. I'll set up an altar to mine, and we'll call on them and see who answers. And so the priests of Baal, they erect their altars, and then they start begging and praying and jumping around the altars. But the whole morning goes on and nobody answers. And Elijah mocks them. It's kind of funny. Well, where are they? They're gods. Maybe they're on a break. Maybe they're on vacation. In fact, there's one little hint in the story that what he's saying is, maybe they're in the bathroom. I don't know where they are, but your gods aren't answering. At that point, if you remember the story, those priests of Baal take out knives and they begin to cut themselves and bleed as they dance around their altars. And still, nobody answers. No fire comes. But then Elijah says, okay, I'm going to call on my God. And he calls on the true God, and fire comes down and consumes the sacrifice. Elijah wins. But listen, there's so much more to that story than just, my God is bigger than your God. It's about what I've been describing. Think of the priests of Baal as all of us sinners who worship in the wrong way. We worship the wrong gods. Think of those altars. Think of like 4 altars here, and they're dancing around as representing money, pleasure, power, honor. Those are the big 4, by the way. Those are the big 4 that we tend to worship. That we think, if I just get enough wealth, I'll be happy. If I just get enough pleasure, enough power, enough honor, boy, if they just give me the title I'm looking for, if they just took me seriously enough, then I'd be happy. Let me tell you exactly how it works. Anyone, by the way, who's wrestled or is wrestling with an addiction will know what I'm talking about. Let's say you convince yourself that wealth will make me happy. And so I dance around the altar of wealth. I put all my energy, all my effort into it to be as rich as I can. And see, when you get a little wealth, you get a buzz from it. Talk to people that start drinking or using drugs or pornography. You get a buzz from it. But what happens to that buzz? It wears off, doesn't it? And then I get a little panicky. I say, well, I must need more wealth. That's the problem. I don't have enough yet. So I strive and strive and strive. I hop around that altar. And I get more wealth. And I get a buzz from it. But what happens? Again, anybody wrestling with an addiction knows what I'm talking about. What happens is that buzz wears off even faster, right? And so I really start panicking, and now my whole life is all about becoming as wealthy as I can. Before you know it, I'm spending my whole life hopping around that one altar. And remember the priests of Baal who are slashing themselves, wounding themselves. Addicts, you know what I'm talking about. That we become so obsessed with something that can't finally satisfy us that we wound ourselves. Look at the next altar of pleasure. A lot of us convince ourselves, if I get enough pleasure, I'll be happy. Pleasure from food or drink or drugs or sex or whatever it is. When you get some pleasure from these things, do you get a buzz? Yeah, that's why we get attracted to them. Talk to alcoholics, their first drink of alcohol, what that was like. This extraordinary buzz. You know, a lot of people, your generation, wrestling with pornography addiction. The first experience of that. What a buzz you get from it. So what happens, though? It wears off. It has to. Because we're not wired for that. We're wired for God. So when it wears off, what do? we start hopping around that altar even more energetically. And the same thing, we get a buzz, but it wears off even faster. And now we're obsessively hopping around that altar. Same with the other ones. Power. We all watched Tolkien's movies, the Tolkien trilogy, right? What's the ring? But a ring of power. See, because power is very enticing. Even a young kid getting a little taste of power loves it. Gets a buzz from it. Same dynamic, though, isn't it? Same dynamic. That buzz wears off. It's got to be replaced. Before I know it, I'm obsessively hopping around that altar, wounding myself in the process. What I'm describing, everybody, is bad worship. Bad worship. The idea is to get our lives off of this obsession with those four things, and rather to hook our desire for God onto God, onto its proper object. And then I'm going to find a life that's not obsessive and self-destructive. I'm going to find a life that's rich and liberating and full of love. See, that's what the faith is about. To be a saint is to know you're a sinner. Look at every saint in the church. Read the story of every and any saint in the church. You're going to find at one time they were hopping around one of those four altars. And then they were set free. They were liberated. Do we have a picture of the Lord on the cross in here? I guess I can't see it, but picture in your mind Jesus on the cross. Thomas Aquinas, whose feast day is today, by the way, Thomas Aquinas said, if you want to be happy, do you want to know the formula? If you want to be happy, Thomas said, love what Jesus loved on the cross and despise what Jesus despised on the cross. You'll be happy. That, I submit to you, young people, is a really good formula. So, picture Jesus on the cross. What did he despise? Wealth, pleasure, power, and honor, right? How wealthy is Jesus on the cross? Well, he has nothing. He's naked, nailed to the cross. He's nothing, possesses nothing, no wealth. How much pleasure does Jesus have on the cross? None. None. He's at the limit of physical and psychological suffering. Power. Oh, that'll make me happy. How much power does Jesus have on the cross? None. None. He's nailed to the cross. He can't even move. No power. Honor. Oh, that'll make me happy. If they honor me enough, then I'll be happy. How much honor does Jesus have on the cross? None. They're mocking him. You know where the cross was? It was right outside the walls of the city, so that anybody walking by would see these poor, pathetic criminals, and they would mock them and shake their heads and spit at them. Remember, over the cross of Jesus, Pilate puts a sign. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. What a joke. That's the point. Wealth, pleasure, power, honor, Jesus lets go of those. And what does he love on the cross? He loves doing the will of his Father. Jesus on the cross is, look, aligned to God. He's mouth to mouth with God. He's in the proper stance of worship. You want to be happy? Take a good, long, prayerful look at Jesus. And you'll see, weirdly, a formula for joy. You know what else it is, everybody? It's a picture of freedom. Now, I know how weird that can sound. Jesus on the cross is free, but look at it this way. See, we tend to think of freedom as freedom from other people, so I can do what I want. But that's not what the Bible means by freedom. The Bible means freedom from attachments, so I can be free for doing the will of God. See, the saint is truly free because she's not attached to wealth. She's not attached to pleasure. She's not attached to power or honor. And therefore, she can do what God wants her to do. So all of us are sinners, right? We all are. Everyone's sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, St. Paul said. We're all sinners. Every one of us, if you want, is an addict. Because we're hopping around one of those four altars, everyone in this room. Jesus wants to set us free. Free for joy. Free for fullness of life. That's what it means to be a saint. Okay, let me give you path number 3. A saint is someone who realizes his life is not about him. To be a saint is to realize that your life is not about you. So let me just start with the initiation rituals that kids your age and younger in many cases went through in the primal civilizations. So all over the world, whether you're in Asia, Africa, the Americas, we can find these civilizations that brought their young people through an initiation process. You know, here's how it worked typically. I'll focus first on men, young kids. The young boy, around the age of 13 or so, was taken out of his home by the men of the tribe. They would forcibly come in and take him out of his home. They would then typically scarify him in some way. You know what I mean? Like scars on the cheeks. Or maybe they'd knock out a tooth. They would do some permanent damage to the kid, physically. They would then bring him into the lore